again, Chris. Thanks, welcome again for joining. And today we are going to talk about storytelling. Go for it, Chris.
Thank you, Baachu. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. This topic, proposal themes, has been of significant interest of mine since I started in the proposal field many, many years ago. There were some surveys about some of the hot topics that proposal professionals were concerned about, and themes, benefits, features, proof points continually make their way to the top of the list. So it's something I started having interest in and started writing about a number of years ago, back in 2008. And then a few years later was awarded by APMP the honor of one of their top articles in their quarterly magazine. And since then, I've done a lot of more writing about it, more training on it. And I really appreciate the opportunity here because I've taken a fresh look at some of the ways that I've presented this in the past. And I've presented it to literally hundreds of staff and consultants. And I've simplified the message and expanded on the message. So I'm really pleased to be able to sort of release that today. So let's just dive in here. First of all, I think that it's important to understand some of the terminology around themes. There's a lot of people throw the term win themes around. Nobody really knows what they are. What I can tell you is that I was on a very big procurement a number of years ago. It was a $2 billion bid. And when I read the proposal as part of the review team, I found it was horrible. And they asked me to come down to the proposal site and the war room. And I said, well, what are the themes of this proposal? Because in reading it, I really couldn't tell what those themes were. And they pointed me to the whiteboard in the corner of this big, huge war room. And they had these things listed on the whiteboard. Best value, no risk. We understand you better than anybody else. CMMI level 3, that's a technical term. I won't get into the specifics, but it has to do with the maturity level of your IT department. Relevant past performance and superior technical solution. And I looked at these and I thought, well, there's no wonder why the proposal is so horrible, because these really are not themes. These are really good examples of what themes are not. They are at best basic requirements, half-baked features, unsubstantiated benefits, pipe dreams even. I mean, there's no such thing as a project that has no risk. Some of these were, I mean, best value was an actual requirement in the RFP, the tender. So was relevant past performance. So these were about as bad as you could expect in terms of getting themes. And so we took a more pragmatic approach to defining themes in this case, and they ended up actually winning the business. But let's go back a little bit in history, because themes have been around for quite some time. They're not new. The idea was started actually in the 1960s with then Hughes Aircraft, now Raytheon, who were developing massive proposals for the federal government. And they couldn't figure out why they were so hard to develop, why they weren't scoring well, why proposal teams were so frustrated. And they developed a methodology called STOP, which basically, as a metaphor, meant before you start writing, stop and think about what you're doing. And the idea of then what was called a thesis statement, which has evolved into a theme sentence, a theme, evolved. And this is what they said in the STOP manual. I'll quote it here, but I thought it was really interesting to relive some of the language and some of the ideas all the way back from the 1960s. And for those of you who are reading proposals, you can, I think, identify with this. If it's poorly written, the reader is right from the beginning thinking, when is this going to end? And what is the point of the author? And so this whole idea behind this methodology was to develop a process and a way to make proposal writing more efficient and more effective, and in the end, win more. And a big part of that was this thesis statement. So if you zoom ahead 20 years later, you've got a company called Shipley Associates. Many of the people on this call are probably very familiar with Shipley, who sort of institutionalized and codified the idea of proposal writing, starting with the federal government here in the United States, and then progressing outwardly into the commercial world, and then more of an international flavor. In their A to Z proposal manual, they talk a lot about themes, and they talk specifically about features, benefits, and proof points. They dedicate probably more page count to those topics than any other topics in their entire manual. And what they say is that themes are really the most effective way to communicate to your customers. They answer the question, why pick us as opposed to your competitors? They link customer benefits to your solution features. And these are going to be two really key and critical points that we'll be talking a little bit more about in detail. And that those features contain supporting proof points to substantiate, to prove that those features are actually true. So in order to have a theme, according to Shipley, and I strongly believe I make a case for this throughout this presentation, is you really have to have three things. You have to have benefits, features, and proof points. And if you don't have those three things, then you really don't have a theme at all. You've got part of it, but not all of it. So what I've seen in my experience is that even though this seems like a very simplistic idea, features and benefits get very confusing to people. The terminology gets confusing. And so I use an analogy of a used car, of a car dealership in order to get this point across. And it's a stereotypical example, at least that's the way it starts out with a gentleman pulls up in an old beat up Corvette, and the salesperson kind of sizes him up and starts thinking automatically about features and proof points for what he wants to try to pitch to this gentleman. And he's thinking about horsepower, and he's thinking about how fast the car can go, how quickly it can achieve that speed, and how great the design of his new Corvette might be. And later, a woman comes up to the car dealership, and he sizes her up. Again, stereotypical approach, thinking about, well, she's probably a soccer mom, and she's probably interested in our special on SUVs, and here's some of the features and proof points that she might be interested in. Well, after the car dealership car salesman starts talking to these people, he finds out that the gentleman is really borrowing his friend's Corvette, and he's really a stay-at-home dad, and he's really interested in safety and comfort and storage and security. Those are the benefits that he's looking for. And the idea of pitching a Corvette with the features and proof points below is just not going to work. In fact, it's going to be a disaster. And similarly, the woman is a race car driver from NASCAR, Danica Patrick. She's interested in speed and sex appeal and power and handling, very different from what the features and proof points are that the salesperson might have thought about. So actually, these two cars and these features and proof points need to be reversed. And here's the picture of how it should look. But the point is that you really need to start with customer benefits first. If you don't start with customer benefits in mind, what they are looking for, what they want, what their evaluation criteria are, what their hot buttons are, then no matter how great your features and proof points are, they're not going to resonate with the customer because they're just potentially going to be misaligned. So you really need to understand what the benefits are, and that starts with the customer and what they want. So that's features and benefits. The next important point, or the third leg of the theme stool, if you will, is proof points. And so you can have great benefits, you can have great solution features, but if you can't actually prove that they are, by quantifying them or making sure that they're in alignment with customer needs, or having a third party assert that they're true, customers have a difficult time believing you. And oftentimes the term unsubstantiated claim gets thrown around in proposal reviews. I know I use that term quite often. So for proof, we want to make sure that the proof supports the feature and benefits that the customer cares about. We don't want to prove something that is really not in the realm that they care about. It needs to be related to feature and benefit. Sounds obvious, but in doing this with a number of companies, especially in training environments, all kinds of proof points come up that have nothing to do with what the customer is talking about or caring about in a particular proposal section. They must be quantifiable if possible, and that means using metrics. So when you have proof statements, you want, and we'll see this later, you want to see numbers, you want to see specific metrics, 3 key personnel, averaging 30 years of role relevant experience, some number of relevant past performance examples, a 5-step process, those kinds of things that are quantifiable and metrics based. They must be compelling to the customer. Sometimes metrics aren't terribly compelling. So you need to make sure that those metrics tell your best story. And that requires knowledge of the competition sometimes. And if the answer is 5, the customer wants 5, and you know your competition is saying they have 6, then your metric should not say 3. Even though it is 3, you might want to be silent on that metric. So that's kind of important to sort of think about, not just throwing numbers out there, but making sure that they make sense and they're compelling. Ideally, you want your metrics to be unique. You want to differentiate yourself from the competition. Oftentimes, that's not possible or practical. So if you can do it here and there and in 1 or 2 places, it potentially can make a difference between winning and losing. But you're not going to be unique. You're not going to be better in every particular category. So just try to be unique and to differentiate in those areas where you can. And then finally, a third-party expert of proof is best if you can get it. Oftentimes it's difficult to get. Gartner Group is a great third party. If Gartner Group says that you're in the magic quadrant for innovation and implementation of IT solutions, and you're bidding on an implementation of an IT solution, and Gartner says that you're the best of the best, that's an important proof point perhaps to bring up. Sometimes quotes from customers can be good third-party expert points. Make a note about asking me about that a little bit later at the end, and we'll talk a little bit about the value of quotes because I have some strong feelings on that. Sometimes they can backfire. So that's feature, benefit, and proof point. Now let's just summarize with a theme shortcut. First, some terminology, and these are terms you see thrown around a lot. They're referred to in the Shipley manual, and I hear them a lot. This idea of pain points I view as a sort of a superset of things that the customer cares about. Within pain points are actual evaluation criteria that you will typically see in a tender or in an RFP. Those are the most important things that you want to be focused on in terms of theme development. Sometimes you hear the term hot buttons. Those are things that the customer cares about. They may or may not be in the RFP for one reason or another, or they may be at a lower level of detail, more detail than the evaluation criteria. So they're important to keep in mind, but evaluation criteria is the most important thing when you're thinking about theme development. So theme development, as we talked about in the car salesman example, starts with a benefit, and that's all about the customer. Typically their evaluation criteria is where you will see those. Then if you add the next component of the theme is your solution features, that's your solutions that are aligned to those benefits. So if the benefit is increased efficiency, what is it about your solution that lends itself to higher levels of efficiency? Or if it's about low risk, or if the benefit is about increased effectiveness, or if it's a best value benefit, what are the solution features that align with that? And finally, what are the proof points that support your solution features? Again, metric-based third party. And if you have these 3 things, then you have a theme. So hopefully that helps sort of summarize the whole approach to theme development. Those 3 things: start with the customer, benefit, your solution, components, feature, and then metric-based third-party proof points. So let's say that you're convinced that themes are the way to go. Let's say that you're convinced that they're relatively easy to develop, right? There's only really 3 components. The next sort of question people ask is, where do themes go? And I would advocate that the quote unquote win themes are the high level meta themes that all of these sort of bubble up to become. And typically you don't want to confuse the customer with more than 2 or 3 of those. But this presentation is more focused on proposal themes at the proposal level, the more detailed level. They start at the different volume levels. That could be technical, that could be management, could be past performance, it could even be cost. You want to have very quantifiable and visible themes at the volume level. Within volumes, there are typically sections, and often proposal teams will have theme statements at the section level. If you're in the management section, you have one about your management approach and methodology. You might have one about your key personnel. You might have one about some of the other things in management, like risk or like quality, and so on. And then finally, at the detailed level, you might have themes at the requirements level. So in the technical volume, if there's a list of 50 requirements and you're talking about each one, you might have a theme. Now, how those themes look, the amount of detail behind those themes and the focus of those themes would be really different. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So let's look at the 5-step process. And I've defined a process here that I think is relatively easy to digest. And I've sort of codified it for this audience in 5 steps. And the first step is really find the inputs that are important to develop the theme. And these are generally mostly in your tender, mostly in your RFP. The vast majority of them have evaluation criteria, and that's where you're going to find the benefits that customers are looking for. There may be some background information at the beginning of the tender. There may be some clues in there. Then there are clearly some instructions of how the client or customer wants your proposal laid out. And so you want to organize your themes along the way that the customer is thinking about your response. And so if there's 4 volumes, then you want 4 high-level themes. And if one of those volumes has 6 subsections, then you might contemplate 6 themes within that subsection. And then finally, the detailed requirements. Those are all in the public domain. Those are all in the tender. Those are all in the RFP. Everybody should have no problem finding those. The other 2 that I've highlighted here in italics are ones that you may be uniquely positioned to find out about. If you're the incumbent contractor, you may know a lot more about what's happening behind the scenes, and you may be able to identify other customer hot buttons that most of your competitors do not. And that will give you a competitive edge if you use that intelligence appropriately. Also, knowing the competition will help you with themes and who are they, what is their focus, what is their legacy, what does the customer think about them. So those are the inputs. And if a proposal team has the benefit of a capture plan, which is a best practice methodology, then those hot buttons and competitive intelligence would be documented in there. If not, then you want to talk to the people who know the customer the best, people on the ground, people in your capture team. The second input is your solutions. What are your solutions for this particular bid? And I use that term very broadly. What are your technical solutions, obviously, but what are your past performance solutions? What are your management solutions? What are your cost solutions? What are your key personnel solutions? So there's a number of different solutions depending on what section you're in of the proposal. And then the themes, obviously, you've got features, benefits, and proof points. And then you've organized them according to the instructions, which is number 2 above in the inputs. And in this particular case, our example has 4 different volumes. So we're organizing our themes across those 4 volumes. So that's step 1, identify the inputs and identify your solutions, and then you can develop themes. So step 2 then, actually, before we get to step 2, I'm going to do an example, a technical example to show you how how we can collect this information and how it might work. These are actual requirements from an RFP, from a tender. The requirement was to provide an automated tool for software development. The instructions said, describe the tool and how it saves time and reduces cost. That saves time and reduces cost, important benefit. Keep that in mind. The evaluation criteria, ability to meet or exceed what they were calling service level agreements. They actually came out and said lowest risk scores the most points. So again, a low risk approach, a benefit is going to be a key element of our theme development process. Some of the hot buttons that came across in our capture plan was that proven software, proven automated tool for software development was very important, especially if it was on commercial projects. And an intuitive user experience or interface was critical. And then on some of the customer intel here, our team was able to find that previous contractors have failed miserably in training programmers efficiently. And that's important information that was not in the RFP that could be really beneficial for how you structure your theme. And so in this simplistic model, our solution is something called Easy Code Software. That's the automated tool for software development. And we're going to develop themes based on with benefits, features, and proof points that we're actually going to pull from these inputs that all came from either the RFP, the tender, or from the capture plan. So step two then, once we've gotten all of the inputs, is to organize those inputs that we saw in the previous slide into a very simplistic table, a feature benefit proof table like you see here. It's about as simple as it can be. We start with the customer benefits, as we talked about. Again, we're pulling information from the previous slide. I like to keep the benefits simple, 2 or 3 maximum. Saving time and reducing cost was a big one. Low risk was another big one. And then efficient training was a third one. That was the hot button or the competitive intel that no one else is going to have unless they've got the same intel that we have. So once you've got the idea of what the benefits are, then you start thinking about what the solution features are for those. And you start populating your table with that. In this particular case, our big feature is the software. And that is easily stated in this table. We've got sort of 3 outstanding projects that support that. On low risk, we're reducing staff training time. We've got a number of successfully commercial projects, another piece of intelligence that we collected. The proof points, you'll see the metrics starting to come here, reducing training time from 4 hours to 1 hour. A large number of relevant projects within the last 3 years, which is what the customer required. Features for efficient training, intuitive user experience, reduced staff training time. And here we've got a great third-party metric from hopefully Information Week is a known resource that our evaluators are familiar with, and that a #1 rating for usability there would be a compelling metric. And you see the date 2021. I've seen situations where we've coded Information Week and the date was 5 years ago, and that's ancient history, and that actually will hurt you more than help you. So again, the metrics that you use are important to sort of screen and think about how impactful they're going to be. So that's step 2, is get the benefits, features, and proof points, put it in a table. Once you've got that done, and that's really the hard part. The hardest part, I think, is this part. Once you get that done, the third step is to write the theme statement. I've got some examples here of theme statements that you could write given that table. You could write, our technical approach includes auto-coding software. That is as basic as it could be. Anybody could say that. If that's going to be your theme statement, I would not even bother. I think that's going to maybe hurt you more than help you. You could say our Easy Code software. Now you've named it. It's a trademarked software. We reduce time and cost. So now you've got a feature, the software. You've got a benefit, reduce time and cost. We're getting a little bit better, but anybody bidding on this is going to have their own software. And if they're smart enough, they're going to align that with reducing time and cost. So I would say that's kind of a ho-hum theme statement and not terribly compelling. The next one is, well, it really is our intuitive user experience about the software, and it can reduce staff training time by, here's a metric and a proof point, 75%. So there's still some ways to improve this. You don't want to use the word can. It's a passive word. So there's ways to reduce that. And 75% is a great metric, but I don't know if that's 3 hours to 1 hour or 3 days to 1 day or 3 weeks to 1 week. So there's still some mystery here. That's somewhat compelling, but there's still more room for improvement. And then the final one is our easy code software reduces staff training time from 4 hours to 1 hour. There's our metric-based proof point. How does it do it? With an intuitive user experience implemented on over 20 commercial projects. So when an evaluator reads this and you think about what their evaluation criteria was, their instructions, what their requirements were, what the capture plan had in terms of competitive intelligence and hot buttons, in one statement, it captures a heck of a lot of that. And some evaluators will read that. That's the first thing they're going to read, and they'll be excited, and they'll want to read on to learn more. And it's a dramatic difference from how most proposals start, and we'll show what that looks like. But the problem with writing a theme statement is you're limited to one sentence. And there's a lot of information in that table that would either, you really couldn't write one sentence, or you'd end up writing a paragraph. So what I like to use, and it's step 4, is developing a focus box that I pair with my theme statement. So the focus box lets me use a less complex theme sentence, and I get away with not having to include all of the differentiators and all of the proof. And it's a graphic, it's visually appealing, it draws the evaluator's attention. It includes a summary of the theme statement up top. And then it has 3 to 5 bullet points summarizing the major features, having the metrics that we talked about, having a limited number of bullets. You don't want a whole page filled with bullet points. 4 to 5 is generally a good number. Sometimes I see 6. If you've got subject matter experts helping you, they'll often ignore this and put 10 or 12 in there, and you got to dial it back. And the same with 2 lines maximum per theme statement bullet point. And when I do a capture plan for my proposal team, or a storyboard, or whatever you want to call it, in the template, I will include a focus box example with these exact instructions. And if a subject matter expert or an evaluator, or a writer ignores those, I'll just send them back and say, look, these are the instructions. I want a uniform look and feel of my theme statements and my focus boxes, and I really want them to map to these conventions. So that's step 4. Step 5, the final step, is just to put all of this together. Put the theme statement together, map it with the focus box that we talked about. Now you'll notice in this focus box, they're largely the same proof points that were in the table. So if you go back to that table and look at the proof points, they're all represented here in one way or another. So the actual development of this theme statement, this sentence, very simple and short. You want to keep it probably less than 25, 26 words. You want to keep all of your proposal sentences probably that short anyway. And you want the focus box to tell the story that's differentiating and provides the proof. The theme statement itself isn't really going to differentiate you so much. If your competitors are smart, they're going to have their own auto coding software. They won't maybe know about training because that was in your capture plan and that was not in the RFP. But they may be able to assemble the rest of this theme statement based on what they know in the RFP. So that's how it all comes together. If you don't use this approach, you'll see something that I see so many times. It's become an industry joke. It's the do nothing option, where proposals start with this in the executive summary: our company name, acronym is pleased to respond to a long project name and then an acronym, for a long customer name and then an acronym, and then a whole bunch of information that the customer really does not care about. They didn't ask for employees, they didn't ask for revenues. We talk about how great we are, we throw in some gobbledygook, we throw in some ho-hum ideas, we throw in some terms that aren't really defined and that are just marketing fluff. And then maybe at the bottom, we've got some buried theme here that we've got auto-coding software. And so this is an example of proposals that I see. I saw one yesterday. I was reviewing one yesterday for a particular customer, and this is how their executive summary almost verbatim started. And my advice to them was, hey, you got to use theme statements, you got to use focus boxes, you got to have a totally different approach that aligns your response with what the customer cares about. This could have been written for any customer in any situation and is not compelling, and in my opinion is an absolute loser of an approach, unless this is a price shootout bid and you've got the right price and they're ignoring the written part of the proposal. So what happens if you have a proposal like this and you have a review? It's really predictable. These are some of the comments that I document time and time again when I'm asked to review proposals. I can almost start with this list and then modify it based on what I see. But major themes and discriminators are often missing. Important points are buried. You need to raise them up. The idea of theme development is a top-down approach where you put the summary first and then the detail, and the evaluators read the summary first, and then if they're interested, they read the detail. A lot of unsubstantiated claims, that means no proof points. Cliches, it's your best of breed approach. We give you our A team. Those things are relatively meaningless unless you define what those are. A lot of vague and general terms and boilerplate text that is just outright boring. It demonstrates that you really don't understand the customer, what's important to them, what they want, how they're going to evaluate you, how they've structured the response. Evaluation criteria not explicitly addressed, obvious. Past performance, often the proof of how we've done it before, where we've done it before, the great results that we've achieved before, missing. And then a comment that I include in a lot of my reviews quite often is not enough how. Tell me how you do it. Don't just tell me what it is, but tell me how. So what happens in a proposal review is you've got expensive senior resources reading a proposal that's basically rejected, largely because it really is not compelling and it's not compliant. And the idea of using themes as a mechanism for determining benefits, for determining solution features, and determining proof points up front makes a major difference. So let's see, what does that look like in terms of the best practice proposal when you put the theme together with everything else. Here's what the page should look like. The first page, theme statement right at the top, highlighted, any way you like, different color, italics, something. Paired with a focus box with all of your proof points in there to really sell. Just reading this will give evaluators a total executive summary of this section. Then an understanding the need sentence or paragraph. Here we're talking about staff training time. And the reason we're talking about that is because that's part of our competitive intelligence that no one else is probably going to talk about. And part of our solution is wrapped around that. So we want to make it clear to evaluators, we understand what's happening behind the scenes where other competitors may not be. And so that understanding is not just parroting back what's in the tender. It's really showing some in-depth analysis and understanding of what's happening in the halls of your customer. Then a graphic call out to show a high-level solution. And this is a conceptual graphic. It's not meant to be in final form, but you want to, I mean, this is what I would put in my content plan or my storyboard, something that looks like this. And so that subject matter experts and evaluator and writers know exactly sort of the roadmap for what we want this section to look like. We want them to see what the software looks like. We want to talk about the service levels that the customer cares about. We want to replay the evaluation criteria that they care about. And we want to include an action caption, which is another kind of way to disguise a theme. It's a theme in disguise that's talking about the high points of your graphic. So this is where you want to end up. A lot of companies can get to this point for your executive summary, but what I'm advocating is that this should be your first page of every major volume. And then if you do that and do it right, writing the executive summary becomes a trivial exercise. You take the first page, this first page of the technical volume, take the first page of the management volume, first page of the past performance volume, and I can write your executive summary in an hour or two if you do this right. And then you've got an executive summary that's aligned with the rest of your proposal. So I just want to do a little check on time here, 10:41. So in a quick sort of recap of the 5 simple steps. 1, gather your inputs, figure out what your solutions are. That's from the RFP. Read it again, highlight it, mark it up, talk about it. A lot of people read the tender, the RFP. That's the first and only time they read it. That's not going to, someone's got to really dig in and analyze this like they're Sherlock Holmes and look for a bunch of clues that what the customer cares about, to develop solutions and then develop your features, benefits, and proof points for your bid. The second thing is to take all of those inputs, organize them into a table, simple 3-column table. Start with benefits first, then identify the features and proof points for each. Third, develop a very simple theme statement that's largely the benefit and the feature, the major benefit and the major feature. Here, the major benefit: reduced staff training time. Major feature: easy code software, intuitive user interface. And then the proof point is highly relevant projects. In this case, we decided those are the 3 most important things we wanted to highlight without making a long, unwieldy statement. Then develop your focus box and then putting it all together, right? So it sounds, on the surface, it sounds easy. We're all sitting here going, okay, a theme is benefit, feature, proof point. That's easy. I got that. It's only 5 steps, pretty simple. I got that. But I will tell you that this is something that's really, really difficult for proposal teams. They struggle with this. Subject matter experts cannot do this. They're just not equipped to do it. Proposal team writers often are not equipped. The proposal manager often is overstretched and not equipped to do this. So it's really not easy. And there's a lot of metaphors for how difficult this can be. Based on my experience, and I've done this, I've got 200 customers, and for most of them, I've done this sort of thing. Some of them think, you know, it takes the endurance and dedication of climbing the Matterhorn, or it takes, I don't know, meticulous planning and execution and resources to put a person on the moon or a rover on Mars, if you will, or it takes the perseverance of, you know, finding a needle in a haystack. It's that hard to really do this theme development exercise. And I've done these exercises in training many times, and I've seen teams really struggle with what on the surface seems like common sense and very easy to do. But trust me, it's not. So it's not for everybody. So what should you do? I mean, if this is a topic that you think is important, if you think it's a real differentiator, if you think it's a real game changer for you and your organization, then you really got sort of two options: to do nothing, which is kind of the option on the right, which will eventually catch up with you. You'll work too hard and lose too many bids, or do something. And we've got some ideas of some of the things that you could do as we wrap this thing up. But the idea is to do something now. I mean, this presentation might get some great feedback. People might say, hey, that was great. Got some practical ideas. And then, you know, you're often working on some other bid or doing something else, and nothing ever happens. You need to take action. And I would recommend taking some action, if not today, then tonight or tomorrow, to say, I like it, I'm going to do something. And here's what I'm going to do. Once you start, you got to work at it. It's not going to be easy. And it's an iterative process. You will refine your process over time. You will refine your templates over time. Get feedback from your team. Get some outside help if you need it. Get some expert help. It's not expensive, and it doesn't require a lot of effort. And continually follow up. And if you do that, I think you'll be on your way to beginning to understand the importance of theme development and to begin to actually develop them in a way that's compelling and complying to help you win. So here's a little secret for people who are participating here on in this webinar. We've got 41 people. Looks like if you're interested in learning more, the article that I wrote for the APMP Journal, How to Create Winning Proposal Themes, you can do it right now. Take 2 seconds on your smart device, on your laptop, type in Winning Proposal Themes, Rainmakers. And I don't care if it's Google, Safari, Edge, whatever browser search engine you're using, you should see this graphic pop up, How to Create Winning Proposal Themes. And you can download it for free, and it'll reinforce a lot of the concepts that we've talked about here, and it'll get you to the next step of where you need to go. Here are some practical, so after you do that, or if you think that's a good idea, I've got a few practical steps that you can take in order to begin the process of raising the bar in your own internal organization in the area of theme development. So the first one is to develop a proposal template. And it can be, you can call it a content plan, some people call it a storyboard, but something that includes a detailed theme and focus box, what it looks like, guidance for how to write it. And we can be very, very specific here. The more specific you are in terms of giving guidance and instructions to your subject matter experts and writers, the more uniform and higher quality the output's going to be from your team. It's going to save everybody a ton of time. If you already have a template, but it doesn't have that in there, then modify the template and put this enhanced stuff in there, including the styles. I mean, what do we want these things to look like? What are our corporate colors, or what are our customers' corporate colors? What's the font? How many bullet points? What size? What do we want the bullet points to look like? These are exercises that just take a few hours. I mean, not much more at all. It's not a lot. It's not hard. But those are easy things that you can start with. More next steps that might be a little bit more involved is conduct a theme audit of an existing proposal. Look at your last proposal and say, did we have themes? What were those themes? I'm doing this for a customer right now as we're moving from a request for information to a request for proposal. And we're looking at our RFI, information response, and we're looking at our themes, and we're looking at ways to enhance them. We're doing an audit of that proposal. So do an audit of an existing proposal and grade yourself on whether we use themes, how impactful they were, what they were, are they compelling, are they compliant, are they proven? If you don't have an existing proposal that you want to do that, you don't use themes, then conduct theme development working sessions. Identify solutions that you use all the time. Identify benefits that customers look for all the time. And then come up with the features and proof points that relate to that. Review, vet, and institutionalize existing benefits and features that you have in order to improve those. Or develop an in-progress proposal theme development process. Let's say you've got a tender or an RFP you're working on right now. You've not done themes before. Use that as the guinea pig. Use that as a pilot for developing themes, and have a strategy session, have a workshop, have a training session, if you will, to develop that. And that is something you can do internally if you've got the resources and the wherewithal, or you can use external consultants if you don't. I do this a lot. Some of my customers, all they want me to do is outline their RFP or develop their themes. And it's really simple for me to develop themes at this point. And focus box points with just placeholders for the metrics. I mean, they're not really that hard, and they're not terribly different. And for a proposal I just finished last week, I did the the management theme and focus box, the key personnel theme and focus box, the past performance one, and I put all of those together in the executive summary, and then I helped with the technical one. And then we were done, and people loved it, and it was easy to do. It's not terribly expensive. But if you've got internal resources, use them or train them. If you don't, then don't be afraid to ask for help internally or externally. And if you do, you'll find yourself winning more and working less, and making the whole bid and proposal process a lot easier. And that is the end of my prepared comments. I know that we have been actively chatting here. I have not been monitoring the chat as closely as I normally would, because I've been focused on slide and delivering content. But Bhaskar, if you can maybe walk us through some of the questions, that would be great.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for an excellent webinar, Chris. I think this was really absolutely fascinating. So, Chris, just a quick question from my side. Actually, you said, okay, you know what, we all know what to do, but who will do? But in your opinion, who do you think should do this internally within an organization? And when do you think we should do a theme statement?
Okay, great question. So the who should do it, I mean, it's a lot easier if one person does the theme development. And you know, so the proposal manager is the key person here. So in a perfect world, the proposal manager has enough time. They've got a template that they use for a content plan or a storyboard. And they've developed an outline. They're using that outline to expand out on a content plan. And in that content plan, they include an example theme statement and focus box and understanding paragraph and placeholder for a graphic. And if they've read the RFP, they know what the benefits are. And so what I do when I'm managing a proposal in my content plan, if I'm not sure about the benefit in the theme statement, I just put a parenthetical and say, pick one. It's either low risk, increased efficiency, increased effectiveness, or best practice, all things that the customers called out in their RFP. Pick one, that's our major benefit. And then our solution features need to be aligned to the contents of the section. So if they're talking about key personnel or past performance or risk approach methodology, then all of those clues can be in there. Ideally, you want one person to do it so it's uniform. Ideally, you want your project or proposal manager to do it. When I'm managing, I do it because I tend to be really efficient with this stuff. But a lot of proposal managers have, you know, they're like a one-armed paper hanger is what is one of the analogies. They've got too many things to do and they don't have time to do this. So get help if you can't. Do it for 3 volumes and have someone else do it for a 4th. Hire an external consultant to do it for the executive summary and then leverage off that and have the proposal manager do it for the other sections. There's a number of ways to do it, but I think the short answer is ideally your proposal manager should really do it. Subject matter experts can't do it. Many writers are often not well equipped to do it. And if you ask writers, you're going to get, if you have 6 writers, you're going to get 6 different approaches. And then you're going to have to figure out how to normalize all that. And that's pretty time consuming.
Totally, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for that, Chris. Chris, we have close to 15 questions and we have 7 minutes. So I will do my best. It's going to be rapid random fire question, Chris. Are we ready? Question number 1 from Marisa. Chris, what would you say is the difference between a theme statement and a value proposition?
Okay, so a theme statement is an actual sentence, as we saw. My definition of a theme statement is a sentence that is complemented with a focus box. The value proposition is, and you can look it up in, Shipley has their own terminology for what a value proposition is, and everybody's got a different idea. But a value proposition is typically what's happening behind the scenes before you get to a theme statement to identify what value are you bringing to a customer on a specific topic. And that it's not terribly different. I mean, you want to first start with a benefit, but typically value statements have a quantifiable outcome. Like our approach is going to save you 10% of your operation and maintenance costs. That's a real value statement, a real value proposition. But it's very high level and very vague because we don't know how you're going to do that. And the how comes in the detailed theme statements and focus boxes, in my opinion.
Nice. Thank you, Chris. Chris, should all win themes be presented in an executive summary? This is from Trish.
No. So what you want to do is executives have a limited attention span. And you know, I've seen theme lists of 15 or 20 themes, and nobody wants to hear about 20 themes. Most executives can, and most people can focus on 2, ideally 3, maybe 4. So you need to prioritize them, you need to group them, and you need to figure out what are the 2 or 3 most compelling things. Now, if you're lucky and in the RFP, let's say, or the tender, let's say the customer is weighting your technical solution more than anything else, then your number 1 theme should be about your technical solution. I've seen situations where the number 1 theme listed is about our experience, but that's the 4th most important evaluation criteria. Why are we leading with experience when the customer doesn't care about it? Well, because nobody really read the RFP and nobody read the language that says, here's the order of the evaluation criteria, starting with technical. And then the second one is management. And the third one is key personnel. And the 4th one is experience. So maybe your theme should be aligned with those 4 things. And if you've got 4 volumes, as we saw, and they're coming out of the first page of the volume, then those theme statements are already written and a great way to summarize your proposal.
Nice, Chris. Hope that was useful, Trish. Then let me go for how do you gather the competitive intelligence? This is from Michelle.
Okay, so ideally, now best practice is, you know, a bid is coming, you're planning for it in advance. You know, sometimes weeks in advance, sometimes months in advance. Some of the major companies know that a bid's going to come 5 years from now because they just bid on it and lost, and it's a $2 billion deal. So those particular customers with a lot of resources are developing what are called capture plans, which is a Shipley best practice and an industry best practice. They're developing those years in advance. A lot of the smaller companies, I mean, an opportunity comes up today and we're bidding on it tomorrow. That's the practical reality. So before you kick the thing off, you want to talk to the salesperson or the capture person, and you want to pick their brain about what they know. What do they know about the customer? What do they know about the competition? You know, why are we bidding on this? If you've got a gate review process where you're evaluating your probability of winning over time, then you've got a general idea of what you know and what you don't know, and if you can compete. But if you don't have that, you're just kind of winging it, then you're kind of at the mercy of, of doing research, Google-based industry, internet research, which anybody can do, or talking to the principals of your company, or talking to project managers who do some similar things on similar projects, or talking to partners if you're bidding subs. But it's an information gathering process that a lot of companies don't have if you've got 30 days to respond and the clock is ticking. So that's tough if you don't start in advance. But if you don't start in advance, your chances of winning are drastically reduced anyway. So you might actually consider not bidding if you don't have sufficient intelligence on a customer.
Totally, Chris. I think these days the time it takes to submit a proposal has come as little as 2 days to 2 weeks in certain cases. So, I think companies need to equip themselves to gather some sort of intelligence on an ongoing basis, rather if they don't have time for a specific bid intelligence. That's very useful. I think Niloy and Michelle, they all kind of asked about the similar questions there. That's great. So let me go back. So again, the template was very useful, Chris. I think if somebody who hasn't got experience at all in theme statement, the 5-step process that you had will be a nice stepping point for them to know how to build theme statements, right?
Yep, absolutely right. I mean, it's easy. I mean, all you get, the collecting is the collecting, and that's an approach you can take with anything. I take that approach when I'm doing a presentation, as I collect all the information I need first, and then I figure out how to organize it. And the organizing, I mean, you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, turn it over and put benefit, feature, and proof points, and make 3 columns, and put a couple, 2 or 3 benefits in there, and then start thinking about it. asking your subject matter experts to help fill it in, read the RFP to help fill it in. And then the actual crafting and writing of the theme sentence and the focus box becomes really simplistic and trivial if you've got that table. The table is the key thing, and it's a simple table.
Got it, Chris. I think there's a lot of great thank you messages here from Dick, from Niloy, from Russ, from Ian, from Michelle to I think Patricia. I think there are lots of good messages here, Dick, Chris. I think Venu, Piyush, Georgiana. So Michelle is also saying it's a huge education piece around all the companies. Michael has a positive feedback. But last question, I know we are running slightly time here. Ian asked this question. We'll just wrap this up with this. The thing I'm worried about is that if you have 40 questions you have to answer and everyone includes a proof, doesn't it come across a bit unbelievable, unsubstantiated?
It can. I mean, I would have to look at your 40 questions and I would have to look at your 40 answers. And if you find that you're repeating yourself, it's a great place to put a summary on top of the 40 questions to say, here's our general approach that applies to most of the requirements that you care about, and have a thematic statement at the top level. If you find that you're repeating yourself, there's no real strong, compelling reason to have a theme statement for each of your 40 requirements if they're all similar. But if your solutions are different and your proof points are different, you don't have to have a focus box at that level, at the requirements level. You can have a simple statement that is the beginning statement of a paragraph that blends into the paragraph, or you can call it out with a different font or a different color. But I'd have to look at the requirements and what we're stating to figure out the best way to do it. You could maybe group the 40 questions into 3 or 4 logical groups, and you've got a high level theme for the logical chunk. So it's either one for everything, some logical chunks of maybe 4 or 5, or a slightly stylized or customized sentence for each one if the solution and proof points are materially different.
Perfect, Chris. Thank you so much, Chris. I think that if there is any further questions, you have Chris's email ID. We'll also share the details. Please do directly go back to Chris. We will share the webinar recordings and the slides and stuff to the attendees in the next 48 hours. So I know we have overran. Let me try. Thank you for waiting for even though we overran by a couple of minutes, but it's okay. But for people who are standing, obviously Scribble quiz still happens. So here are the 3 questions. Are you ready? Question number 1, what are the 3 things Chris mentioned is important for proposal themes, which was actually in step 1 and 2? Please write your answer in the chat box. Okay. Wow. I think you all did well. So Michelle, Niloy, Piyush goes to you. You know, you used to give the first person, but now people who are trying gets the answer. So that's good. So thank you for that. Let me have a look. Next question. Chris mentioned that the most important thing in team development is this. What's that one thing that Chris mentioned, the most important thing in a team development? This is a tough one.
I'll give you a hint. It's a subset of the answer to the first question. Customer benefits, Patricia.
So who's winning this, Chris?
I think Patricia got it. Customer benefits, most important thing to start with.
Nice, Patricia, well done. And the last one, an easy one. I know you had a long day. What was the 4th step in Chris's 5-step process?
Yep.
Nice.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Piyush. Thanks everybody who just joined in again. Team will note down the details and we will send back the code for you to access the workshop. Again, thank you so much for joining. Next week, we have Eric Grigory talking about why are some proposal managers more successful than others. Today is Eric's birthday, by the way. We want to wish him happy birthday, wish him. So we'll see you next week. But thank you so much, Chris, for joining today, sharing wisdom. This is just super valuable.
Totally my pleasure. If people have any questions about any of this, feel free to contact me at any time. And Baachu, I'll send you an updated version of the slide deck sometime within the next couple hours.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining and staying so long with us. And we'll see you next week in a new webinar. Take care. Until then, take good care.